Welcome to a podcast company. We're going to do a special episode right now. We're going to talk to someone who has a podcast, a very successful podcast, about what it's like to set up a podcast. Now, you've run one pretty much like the average person does. Not that you're the average person. You're far from the average person. You're extraordinary. You put the small extra into ordinary. But you're someone that's gone, I want a podcast. I'll go online. I'll go to Google. I'll find out what the basic steps are. And then you have, and I'm going to throw a word out there. I'm going to read your mind. But it's been freaking difficult every step of the way.
Yeah.
You've had to find out what website to use, what hosting to use, where to get analytics, how to get analytics, what thumbnails work, what titles work, how long an episode should be, how many guests is the perfect, all those things, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because everybody's got an opinion about a lot of these things that you've just mentioned, like how long should it be?
Yeah.
It's like, well, this somebody says this, and then how long should your title be? Well, it should be short, and then someone else says it should be big, and you're just like, oh, I don't know.
Assholes and opinions. Everyone has one. Unlike anything else, there doesn't seem to be a recipe to what you're doing. You don't know that 3 eggs, a teaspoon of butter, some sugar, and some flour makes a cake. And no, that doesn't make a cake. I just don't know how to cook. I got no other example to use.
No, there's not. But I think it's down to the individual to almost pick and choose. You know, you're in the supermarket, and I guess you just need to know which ingredients you need. You know, some of them are like, oh, that's cool, but I don't need it. Oh, I don't think I need it. So I guess you just have to filter out some of this stuff and say, it's like, what's necessary? What do I need to have to get this thing up?
So what would you say was the goal of the podcast? What was the point of the podcast? Because that was obviously that's why you went into the grocery store, to make the podcast.
Yeah.
What was the point of the podcast?
So the point of the podcast is to attract a certain type of listener that will get into the business and be a predictor. So when I say a certain type of person,
I suppose the difference is when we start a podcast, when Brett and I start a podcast with a podcast company, we go, what's the point of the podcast? And we go, well, we want listeners. We don't just want listeners. We want listeners that are active to do what? Active to go to the website, active to register as part of the newsletter, active to buy the books, active to come to the events, active to be a part of what we're creating, to buy the product or the service that allows us to keep doing what we love. And I don't think that's been obvious with your podcast, right? I mean, as you said yourself, that hasn't been like an obvious sort of connection.
It was a nice to have thing. It was a good idea. You know, it started off as, well, let's have a podcast and business.
And would you say, Brett, like all the podcasts that you've done and all the sort of production of that, is that typical of someone that starts a podcast? That they have a basic understanding of what they want to do, but they're not coming in going, I want to start, grow, monetize, and syndicate. And this is what I think is how many people I need for my podcast. This is how much money I think I need to create for my podcast. And this is how many channels I want to be on for my podcast.
Yeah, definitely. I think there may have been a brief blip of the big picture like that, but then they get lost in the details.
Yeah.
Because there's a ton of details, as you well know, to put out any show and any digital content. And so I think that definitely gets
lost in
translation, if you will. And I guess one of my challenges, not for you, but more for maybe Pink as a whole, would be, do you have analytics to support why video should be important? Because quite honestly, you know, even if I loved what they were doing, I might not have the screen time to devote to watching it. And that's one of my arguments with our company, and it's done quite well, actually.
Yes.
People can consume a lot of digital content, but they don't necessarily have time to watch it.
No.
If they can listen while they're commuting, while they're doing other things, it's huge, and you get a bigger market based on that. Yeah. And so I would almost say, seriously look at your analytics of when are things being watched, because chances are the majority of it's probably being watched 10 p.m. to midnight would be my guess. And then people fall asleep. Do they act on it once they...
Well, call to actions, we haven't yet put that in. We don't know what the drive-through is. Yeah. I think that's another thing, right, is this idea that when someone does a podcast, they normally finish it, which seems weird because you're thinking, well, it's so easy to press pause and do something else. But they don't because they've got it in their ears. So they're finishing their dishes and then going, I'm already halfway through the episode. I'll just keep listening while I put the kids to bed, get on the train, go to gym. Whereas with YouTube, and it's a question to you more than a statement of assumption, but how many times do you see big engagement at the beginning, but they don't seem to follow through to finish the episode?
That is generally true, but we have some anomalies. I think the content was so fascinating.
There's some great content.
People just, we were kind of astounded, like it was a 30-minute thing and it was listening, average was 29 minutes. And we're like, thousands of people, average was 29 minutes. It was like,
it's very impressive for the YouTube show.
Yeah. So, and the thing is, so received wisdom is that people watch and then it tears off. But then when you get things coming in that completely
destroy
received wisdom out, you go, oh, well, I just need to do everything.
Yes, but you can't do everything. Anyone, you can be everywhere. So is there a certain recipe that you could say, well, for podcasts, we're getting this much listenership all the way through, and for YouTube, we're getting this much. And is there a way to balance that or to look at which one is more favorable to your content presently?
Yes, I mean, as I said, I think the podcast has been a little bit neglected. I think it just needs attention.
Yeah.
We need to just look at that. The things are going out there, but I think what's happened.
Okay, so I'd say, based on this very short Q&A, we've identified 4 key things. Not knowing where you're going to end makes it very difficult to know where to start and what steps to put into play, right? Like you said, you're not quite sure. You weren't like, we need 1,000 listeners, and 1,000 listeners need to all register on pink.io, free plug. And from that, they're going to become our active participants, which will drive our company, which will bring in money. Nice, easy circle. You were like, I'm going to try some things. We're going to see what works. What works will continue. And then doing that, people have been like, well, you also should try YouTube. And you should also try Spreaker. Yeah. And that's jumped you around. So the lack of having a step-by-step process that takes you from start, grow, monetize, syndicate. Okay. 1. 2, the fact that when you are doing what you're doing, you don't have a voice to speak to, someone that can guide you through the process, because you're sending emails, you're waiting for response times based on different times around the world, which then come back to you and say, well, you didn't do this, and you didn't do that, and that puts you back, and that puts you back. So you're constantly losing people. So far, so good? Yeah. The third thing you'd say is that at the moment, you haven't got the analytics to go, have we grown, why have we grown? You haven't monetized, so there's no real opportunity to go, well, we've got 1,000, let's see if they're 1,000 strong, or just 1,000 people rubbernecking on the road to see the car crash, which is your show. I'm on your show, so I know it's a good show, but let's imagine it wasn't. So that's the third thing. And I think the fourth thing that we've come from this is that if you don't put a value on it, then it's very hard to give it the attention it deserves. If you say, well, it's just something I do on the side and I'll do it whenever I get a chance, it's never going to be as great as if you say, this is my only child, I'm going to give it everything I have, and I'm going to make sure it grows correctly, eats correctly, and becomes something that they can look after me when I'm in my wheelchair looking at people to look after me. So that's the thing, right? You want to be able to monetize your podcast so that you've got money coming in that you can afford to hire the right people. That's why I said to everyone, you should be looking at start, grow, monetize, syndicate. In that order, don't jump steps. Okay, so here's the last thing. If I said to you a coffee cost 99p and the coffee was free, which coffee would you think is better?
Well, it's 99p.
Why?
Because it's got a value, it's been given a value. If it's free, then what's wrong with it? Why are you giving it away free?
Okay, so I think this was the perfect thing. We didn't set up any of this. This is not a trained actor. You can probably pick up on that by watching the show. Monkey. It's definitely a trained monkey. But we've learned a couple of things, and we're going to work backwards. The fact that when you start a podcast, you don't know where you're going. Well, guess what? If you do the course, you find out exactly where you're going. Every single module between Brett and myself is spelled out to you step by step by step. You can't rush ahead. It literally drops in one a day until you finish the course. 2, it talks about starting to grow. You've only got one step ahead of you. Grow your podcast. You grow your podcast, it says, congratulations, you've now grown a podcast to this number, the number you agreed on as your success matrix. Now we're going to monetize. And why do we need money? Because you want to get the right people to help you syndicate, to make sure that you could speak to someone in the US, Brett, to speak to someone in the UK, me and my team, Brett and his team. So you've got that both sides of the world, so that you're not waiting 24 hours, 48 hours, 36 hours to speak to some voiceless bot millions of miles away that doesn't understand your dilemma, who hasn't got a podcast. We have podcasts. We help podcast creators. 3. If you don't add a value to it, people don't care. Mike has a failed podcast. He got given a free course, the course you're paying $11,997 for, but he didn't care because it was free. You care because I'm charging you $11,997. When people ask me, why aren't you giving the course away? This is why I don't give the course away anymore. Started at $2.5 grand. We're now selling at $11,997 only because we're going to get another 25 people through. Those 25 people are finished, we'll get the next 25. We're not going to do hundreds or thousands, which I keep getting emails about. 25. And how can a course that's online be sold out? This is why. 25 people, 25 success stories. We now have 24. One person was not a success story. That would be Mike. Don't be Mike. Thank you for watching A Podcast Company. I hope you understood this was real. It was authentic. No one was trained. There were no real actors used. And you could check out his show, which is a Pink Tank, which is available pretty much everywhere. And of course, it used to be Not Another Crypto Show. Thanks, Mike.